I'd like to introduce one of our board members, who's also a short line operator, Carl Zebarth. Carl has a keen interest in freight rail and passion for passenger rail as well. And Carl is going to be introducing our first presenter here, Senator Huffines.
Thank you, Peter. It's really a great personal pleasure for me to introduce you to Senator Huffines, who represents this district. He was elected 2 years ago and served with great distinction, one of the outstanding freshman senators in the last session. Partly in tribute to that, he was named Vice Chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, which is an important post. He's fifth-generation Texan. Family comes from Ellis County. The grandfather started the well-known Huffines automobile dealerships, which still stays in the family. Don himself has become a major real estate developer in Dallas. He and his wife have 5 children, and they are dedicated and uncompromising advocates for liberty and personal responsibility and preserving family values. The touchstones of his work in the Senate have been to support intelligent roads, but no new taxes, school choice, economic development, family values. I find it I'm starting interesting discussions with Senator Huffines about how rail can actually reduce expenditures on transportation, as a number of the panels that we've had here have demonstrated. So I'd like you to give a warm welcome to my good friend, Senator Huffines.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Senate District 16. Welcome to Dallas, and thank you, Carl, for that introduction, and thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to be here today. It is an honor to be part of the Southwestern Rail Conference. Before I introduce Commissioner Vandergriff, which is my task up here also, I wanted to begin by focusing on the importance of transportation for our state. The vital role you and everyone in this room is playing in moving our people and goods and creating new innovative projects like the high-speed rail system that hopefully Texas is going to get. You know, the past 25 years, Texas population has almost doubled, from 15 million to almost 28 million. Our growth will continue. We're moving in about 1,000 folks a day to the great state of Texas. Over the last 10 years, Texas has created over 50% of all the new jobs in the United States. And while our population growth is a great thing for our state, it comes with challenges, like the obvious strains on our roads and our infrastructure. This is why we must keep pushing to fund transportation and our infrastructure and transportation, our highways, and to continue to promote innovative ways to reduce the traffic burden on our roads. With Proposition 1 and Proposition 7, the legislature met TxDOT's stated need of an additional $5 billion per year. The only problem with that is that calculation only keeps the state at 2010 congestion levels and does not remove toll roads or stop the cycle of selling more bonds. That simply is not acceptable. We can do more, and you in this room are part of the solution. The state must keep supporting alternatives like freight rail and innovative private sector initiatives like the high-speed rail project. Private sector ingenuity and innovation will bear great promise for the future of Texas. From Elon Musk Hyperloop, which is going on the competition down at A&M right now, to changing the timing on signal lights. Everything matters. But the rail industry is a foundation of our state and continues to be a huge driver of our economic prosperity. By transporting goods without congesting our roads or requiring more road maintenance, the rail industry helps our economy while keeping millions of tons of goods off our roads and moving them quicker. In fact, the average freight train keeps 90 commercial vehicles off our highways for every run. Trucks, barges, and airlines operate using infrastructure funded mainly by taxpayers. America's privately owned freight railroads operate almost exclusively on infrastructure they own build, maintain, and pay for by themselves. As a champion of the private sector and free markets, I applaud you for all that you do for Texas. In addition to our railways, we must continue to advance new means of transportation. And the private sector high-speed rail project, which will connect Dallas and Houston using proven Japanese technology, is the next step to move Texas forward. Bringing high-speed rail to Texas will reduce the number of vehicles that use our highways and, of course, boost our economic prosperity. It will reduce travel times and congestions and freeing up countless thousands of folks in Dallas County to be free from their vehicles and not be tied to them. Early fundraising success has proven that Texans are willing and eager to invest in a private sector free market solution to moving Texans across our great state. The total economic impact of construction and operations from 2015 to 2040 is expected to be more than $36 billion for Texas. And it's spurred on with the seed money of Texas Central's direct investment of $10 billion. And you're going to hear more about that here after lunch. Texans will prove that this massive project can be accomplished without state dollars. The state of Texas will not spend any money on this project, and we will not guarantee any of the debt. I applaud Central Texas Railway for developing the project, and I look forward to boarding the high-speed train to Houston as soon as possible. I only wish these guys would build it to Austin, because that's where I got to go all the time. And I'm serious about that. I think I-35 is a lot worse. Providing excellent transportation and infrastructure is a fundamental role of state government. But we don't have a monopoly. The state should always work to promote businesses to participate in the transportation industry. I want to thank you and thank you again for for what you guys do and the personal time and energy you spend, for your company spending billions and billions of dollars to keep freight and people moving in Texas. So get out there and make some money, because profit is a very good thing. I mean, bad things happen if you're not making a profit. So with the help of, that's totally true. With the help and support of Commissioner Vandergriff, I know Texas will have the best transportation system in America. And by the way, he knows a lot about making money, which is why I'm truly have an honor to introduce him today. Commissioner Victor Vandergriff is one of only 5 members of the Texas Transportation Commission. The commission oversees all statewide activities of the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT. He's the only representative from the DFW area. And most of you probably know we have 7 million people in DFW now. And I'd like to point out that's more than 36 states. Again, DFW has more people than 36 states in the union. Vandergriff is an attorney and a private businessman specializing in business development and legislative issues. He was appointed by Rick Perry in March of 2013 to the commission. But before that, in 2009 to 2013, Vandergriff served as the chairman of the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. He was also a board member in North Texas Tollway Authority from 2007 to 2013, where he served as chairman for 2 years, 10 and 11. Vandergriff formerly served as vice president of Van Tile, an automotive investment group, the largest private retail automotive group in the United States. He was involved as an owner, dealer, executive manager in the automobile industry for 25 years. Victor and his family have owned and operated new car dealerships for more than 80 years in DFW, which is almost as long as my family, not quite. On a personal note, I want to tell you guys how much I sincerely appreciate Commissioner Vandergriff's public service and his willingness to foster an open and productive dialogue with the state legislature. He is a true champion of transparency and accountability for the largest highway agency in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Commissioner Vandergriff.
Vandergriff, they met in 1947 as young men attending what was then known as the Dealer's Son School up at General Motors, and they became fast friends at that point in their life and remained that till the end of their days together. And I had many an opportunity also personally to get a chance to work with his father, who was considered one of the finest and most astute businessmen and people, a person in the automobile business, revered and respected across the country. And the apple didn't fall very far from the tree. It's been neat for me in this last year to work with Senator Huffines. He acutely gets the need for transportation dollars, and I appreciate the fact that in a world, we were a tolling world, for example, until we weren't. And I could even tell you almost the very day it happened, and that was when, and I think I saw John Crew here, when the Blackman Corridor project ran afoul of the public, and there was a huge throng of people there, and it just changed the landscape for toll roads and the like at that point. And many people just kind of ignored the obvious, which was that we're going to get you more money, but we used all these tools to leverage that money, particularly in metropolitan areas. But the first person who said, well, they actually need more money than what we're going to give them right out of the gate as a freshman in the legislature was Senator Huffines. And so that gave the department and the industry, I think, the courage to speak up in support of that, to make sure it was clear what we needed and didn't need. I want to also acknowledge a couple other people in the audience that are really far greater experts than I am about rail. I know you heard from Eric Stevens and our department here earlier today, Andrea Lofi, who is the director of our federal affairs, who can recite the FAST Act, all, 1,400 pages of it, backwards, forwards, and sideways, and understands acutely what the transportation funding is. And then my fellow commissioner, Jeff Austin, who really is our Washington, D.C. resident expert, also is the person who's passionately an advocate for rail and diversifying Texas's investment in other things besides just the roads of Texas, and I appreciate that leadership. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge that he really is, I don't know if you'd call him half Metroplex and half Tyler, but he has ties here with his daughters, with SMU, and he has a place here, so he's in Dallas a lot, and appreciate the fact that he's really a fellow Metroplex, if you want to ever, we call each other for that. But to come to the meat of really what I want to talk about with you today is that the glass is half full here in Texas. And I know that's sometimes a little hard from the rail perspective when we are really not putting state money at a significant degree in rail. But I want to talk about the things that are happening, which I think are going to affect rail. And the first one is really the leadership in the state of Texas. And that starts obviously with Governor Abbott. And Governor Abbott has been very passionate about addressing congestion. And congestion takes many forms, and I think at the moment that takes in the major urban corridors in terms of road construction. But I want to come back to that and to where I think that can evolve over time. But he's very passionate, very committed. That's the focus of his administration in transportation, is congestion relief. And I think you'll see and hear more about that in the coming week or so. In addition to that, new chairman, he's actually not so new anymore, he's been there about 10 months, but Tryon Lewis. He is from Odessa, Texas. I've heard him say several times, maybe some of you have when he spoke, that the idea of congestion in Odessa is having to wait through a second round of the signal light. That's really what congestion is to him. So he likes to come to places like the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and get in the middle of it at either in the morning or the afternoon rush hour to really experience what we experience here. Last week, 2 days ago, he and I were at a House Transportation hearing, Chairman Joe Pickett's committee, actually a select committee on HB 20, and Chairman Lewis, we were asked a question about rail, and specifically about the rail that we own out in West Texas. And Andrea Lofi was sitting in the chair, and we laughed that he actually pulled her out of the chair so he could address that question. And the point of that is he was knowledgeable, he was interested, he was informed, and he is passionately committed, particularly to the freight side, but to rail as a solution for congestion release in the state. And he is the first among equals of the people at the commission. So I think that's important. And last but not least, in a trio of people to keep their names in mind, is Commissioner Bruce Bugg from San Antonio. He has strong ties to passenger rail and the rail effort between San Antonio and Austin that's been working for quite some time. But he also understands congestion relief, and he's leading the effort we have in that regard. And a story that happened a few months ago that I think is important is, and timing is everything sometimes, and many of you are aware of the Freight Advisory Committee that met, and there are probably some members here in the room, that met for a couple of years and then issued a report in the fall to the commission. And Commissioner Bugg is taking this opportunity to kind of talk about the congestion relief. And Judge Ed Emmett, the chair of that committee, was there. And Judge Emmett was just by, sometimes it's rather to be lucky than good. He comes up afterwards and says, I've been hearing for a while about congestion relief, and it's no surprise to me the governor's passion for that, because that's what he campaigned on when he was running for the office. But do I have a deal for you? Now, that's me talking in car talk. He didn't say it that way, but that's my background. And he proceeded to go right to the point of the Freight Advisory Committee, which was that for $44.5 billion, you can really start to address the problems and challenges of getting the freight moving faster, better, and more efficiently through the state of Texas. And Commissioner Bugg took note of that, and that's been at the hallmark of it. So I want to emphasize that in addition to people like me and Commissioner Austin and all of you in the industry there, you've got some building blocks in place in terms of leadership of this state. At the moment, that would be focused on freight, but I think there's an opportunity to be focused on the other side of it as well. And Senator Huffines touched on the high-speed rail effort. And I really do believe this. We're really not a passenger rail place. But if the high-speed rail effort is successful, coming from Houston to Dallas or Dallas to Houston, depending on what city you're in, then I believe a few things else will happen. In addition to that being a purely private investment, I don't believe, and how many people here from Fort Worth that are in the audience? So there's few, okay. I don't think anyone in Fort Worth is going to rest, no offense to the city of Dallas, until there is a connection over to Fort Worth. Now, I can't be sure that's going to be a high-speed rail connection. Certainly, Texas Central Partners has not advocated that they can do that as they are doing as a private sector venture here. And I don't want to speak for Tim Keith and his people directly, but I believe that to be true. But you have that opportunity, that leveraging off a private sector investment to put billions of dollars towards a rail line. I believe Fort Worth will push on it. I believe Dart, for example, will be able to expand more rapidly. It's just a visionary thing that I think can happen. So sometimes it's little sparks of things that occur. And just as we were a tolling state until we weren't, we're an anti-rail state until perhaps we could be. And so I think that that's why it's important, and why in this last session I, Senator Huffines, and a number of members of the legislature, Commissioner Austin as well, really fought hard to what I would call give Texas Central Railway the opportunity to fail. I know they sometimes cringe when I say that, but what I meant by that is that we can't invest in rail at this point in Texas. We are not authorized to do that, passenger rail, unless we get a specific appropriation to do it, which we don't have. So there's really no risk to the state that we're going to run off and spend a bunch of money on rail. But on the other hand, because of that protection for the state, dollars, then we have the opportunity to let them be successful as long as we can help guide them and really more administer their needs going through the environmental process. Managed to survive in this last legislative session. I'm confident that going into the next one that they'll be able to present a good enough business plan that they'll continue to get that opportunity, again, I hate to say it this way, to fail. And what I really mean is, let's don't make it happen for them. Let's give them every opportunity to succeed. So see that. I also want to tell you about the money side, that there's a challenge in building all the roads in the major metropolitan projects, no question. When we told you we needed 3 plus 1 plus 1, which was for new projects, $1 billion for maintenance and another $1 billion for the energy sector, we really assumed that you could leverage that. And certainly with the able assistance and leadership of the Texas Transportation Institute and our new executive director, former chief financial officer, that testimony was really delivered in the legislative session that leveraging was worth something near $5 to $7 billion a year. I mentioned Senator Huffines earlier. We didn't start talking about that till like April, March, late March. Senator Huffines was saying that in January, that we probably really needed $10 billion instead of $5 to get there. We don't expect that to change. I mean, we're grateful. The glass is definitely half full that we have the money we have. It's fascinating to see that, and rewarding for all of us that have been working in transportation for a long time, that really starting in 2018, as much as another $2.5 billion would come in, and then a couple of years later, 20-year fiscal 20 or 2020, you'll have $3 billion coming in. Those are tremendous riches for us, and we could be any other state in the union and be in a worse position. So we're grateful for that. We have to make those dollars work and work efficiently, and we have to show the legislature that we can be accountable and that we can perform well with what we have, and then we'll see where the winds take us, so to speak, going forward. And with that, I want to talk about why it's important that we have a process that's going on out there, and it's kind of a revolution of sort inside of TxDOT and the state government, really affording us an increase from about a $10 billion a year budget to, when it all settles in, roughly $15 billion a year, with most of that money being able to go to projects. I think it's fair for the legislature to say, we want to understand how you do your business. And what they really want from us, or really what I would think is three key fundamental things, if I boiled it down. One is to look at the funding allocations. How do you put the money in the categories that you have? There's 12 categories of the Unified Transportation Plan. How does the money get allocated into those categories, and why? And they want us to justify that. And then the second is they want us to justify through a series of performance measures and metrics, which we pitch, establish, and then certainly look to the legislature to confirm that we've got it right, to really measure the performance of the money that we're investing. And even though we have 80-something federal and state guidelines or measurements that are out there, we don't use those measurements. Those are really accounting measurements so that the federal government can track dollars and the state government can track dollars, or the state auditors, the legislative budget board can track the dollars they give us. But what we really need are performance measures on a business perspective. I'm sure almost all of you have performance measures that help you manage your business. We need to do the same, and it's perfectly reasonable for the legislature to ask to do that. But part of those measures will really come down to a third category. It's almost a subcategory in that third tenet, if you will, of HB 20. And that is that they want to see from us how we prioritize and select projects. They want to see a path for that. And they want to see us mirror up and be in sync with the metropolitan planning organizations, the rural mobility authorities, and all the authorities out there. And we're in the process of working through those things. So the point being is three big key things to look for. Funding allocations. Where's the money going? How are you accountable for it? Performance measures and metrics. How are the dollars bringing back a good return for the state of Texas, the best return? And then, in addition, project prioritization selection. How's that important? How does that work for rail, at least as I see it? Well, something else I say, and maybe some of you have heard me say this before, is that I know when you enter a major metropolitan area that you can spend real quickly $250 million just to redo an interchange. I've got one in Arlington, the State Highway 360-930, that the interchange is the same it was in 1957 when the toll road opened. The only difference is the toll booths aren't there, but it's not workable. Any of you that ever drive that know that. It's not workable in today's traffic. It's an automatic traffic jam every single minute of the day. And that's being fixed. It'll be in the next 3 years it'll take to do it, but it'll be fixed. But it's a $250, $300 million interchange. And when it's done, it will make life better there. Congestion relief for sure, mobility for sure, but that is a corridor in which the economic life there is pretty established. I don't know how much more economic growth will come out of that because the market moves on. We've got all sorts of other things happening in the Metroplex. On the other hand, if we took that same $250 million, and I use Arlington as an example, so it's my hometown, but if we had done that there and put that towards the ports and helped them deep water dredge that, then how much faster would that have pushed out commerce coming into the state, economic gain to the state, and then in turn, if we had been able to spill that into helping the freight industry expand, taking that freight off of the ports, going south or north, either by rail or by road. So those are the kind of discussions, I think, with the dollars we have coming and with the performance measures that we have to put in place, that I think we can start to have. And then coupled, as I've said, with the opportunity that we have with Texas Central Partners and Texas Central Railway, I see that potentially as a catalyst on the passenger side. There are a couple other things coming that I think are important to recognize, and maybe some of you, those in the Metroplex for sure, have probably heard and read recently of some references to a project called Dallas City Map. And that is a project in which, frankly, about a year and a half ago, the various factions in Dallas on the downtown corridor were at war with each other, literally almost shooting each other, it seemed like. And unfortunately for us at TxDOT, we were getting some collateral damage in the district because, we were issuing reports and participating in things and being tainted as being for something or against something. And we took a time out, everybody took a time out, and we, TxDOT, invested heavily in a group of what I would call our version of some all-star team of consultants, that everybody that had an issue with downtown, a desire, a dream, those issues were brought to life. Over 130 different stakeholder groups are engaged in that. It took us a year, from January 14 until here now, January 15, to get ready to issue a report. That report in draft form is out. It's not public yet because part of the commitment we've made to all those stakeholders is to go back out to those stakeholders and make sure we captured their hopes and dreams and ideas appropriately. We're not taking positions. In Texas, we're responsible for the congestion and the mobility issues associated with the roads. There are lots of other things to do. But when that does come out, I think you're going to see something pretty remarkable, because you're going to see build-out opportunities for Dallas. And those build-out opportunities for the next 50 years, they have, without us doing it, without us advocating that we can spend money for it, but it make it very clear that between high-speed rail and passenger rail and freight rail, to the extent it touches, are significant drivers and opportunities. And our report doesn't just show the typical thing you'd see about what the design is or what it would cost or things like that. It also has detailed calculations on the economic impact of the investment here. And it's amazing to see those numbers. And I hate to give that kind of teaser, but I want to do that for a group like this because I think you're going to be pleased. And I think that will help jumpstart a discussion here about what are the priorities that the leadership in Dallas and Dallas County want to invest in. It's not necessarily state dollars here, but there will be significant opportunities for them to leverage off of the growth that can be possible out of this. It's a fabulous vision for what Dallas can be, but it's a vision that hopefully the state can support over an extended period of time, and then leading up to that, that the leaders of Dallas can make some decision about how to prioritize their projects. So I think that's important to see. So to me, with all the challenges that are out there, and there's always a challenge, the glass definitely at TxDOT and the state of Texas is half to three-quarters full, and I think the potential for the rail industry is as significant and as great as any out there. I think your day's coming, and it's a far cry from when I remember. I was talking earlier, and I remembered an episode in 2009. I was successful in another venture of leading the charge for the legislature to break a portion of TxDOT off into what is known as the Department of Motor Vehicles. And that's been a very successful venture for the state. It's very customer focused on what its business is, which is really not the drivers of the road, the ones that get their license and registration from us, because we don't issue those directly, or that department doesn't. They really, our customers were people like the tax assessor collectors, the freight movers, the oversized, overweight permits that we had to issue. And we did a lot of great things there, and they're pumping in almost $200 million more a year, every year now, 7 years into going into its seventh year of operation. So far, over $1 billion more have been generated into Fund 6 as a result of the creation of that agency. And in fact, I can't help but notice one other person in the audience here, Stephen Polonsky, who's now with TTI, who was the legislative director for the Transportation Committee, and Senator John Corona, who was Senator Huffines' predecessor, carried that bill, and I know that all of those men and women that supported that, but certainly Stephen, it wouldn't have happened without him, have to be proud of the fact that the agency has succeeded with its customer base, but literally over $1 billion has been put in since then. And But the point that I was going to tie it to rail and end it with this little ending is that, before all that's happened, all the good stuff that's happened, I get greeted on my probably second week on the job as the chairman of the DMV, which at this point had no employees, and I was officing out of a closet, it's seriously true story, in the back of a TxDOT building. That's what they gave me. And come to find out that because of the creation of the DMV, we were now considered a diversion of TxDOT money, even though we'd originally been the appropriation came out of TxDOT, so we were a diversion. And because of the creation of us, that we knocked out the rail relocation money. It just precisely almost to the dollar, the money was to go into rail relocation fund. For those of you who remember that legislation from back then, that was knocked out because of the DMV. Through Attorney General opinion and efforts, we were not declared, we certainly were not a diversion, so we settled that question, but we never got you the money. And reminded today here at lunch that I owe a debt somewhere down the road that we're going to have to figure out through your hard work and deserving efforts and projects that make sense to figure out how we get that money back that should have been there way back a number of years ago. So with that, I appreciate very much you having me here, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me, my fellow commissioner, Mr. Austin or Jeff Austin, and certainly Senator Huffines to talk transportation anytime. Thank you.